Hello, this is Papa B reading, and I am continuing now reading chapter 7 from the Magicians Nephew, which is part of the complete chronicles of Narnia, written by C.S. Lewis and done by the HarperCollins Publishing Company. And so, chapter 7, What Happened at the Front Door? "Now, slave, how long am I to wait for my chariot?" thundered the witch. Uncle Andrew cowered away from her. Now that she was really present, all the silly thoughts he had had while looking at himself in the glass were oozing out of him. But Aunt Letty at once got up from her knees and came over to the center of the room. "And who is this young person, Andrew, may I ask?" said Aunt Letty in icy tones. "Distinguished foreigner, very important person," he stammered. "Rubbish," said Aunt Letty, and then turning to the witch, "Get out of my house this moment, you shameless hussy, or I'll send for the police." She thought the witch must be someone out of a circus, and she did not approve of bare arms. "What woman is this?" said Jadis. "Down on your knees, minion, before I blast you." "No strong language in this house, if you please, young woman," said Aunt Letty. Instantly, as it seemed to Uncle Andrew, the Queen towered up to an even greater height. Fire flashed from her eyes. She flung out her arm with the same gesture and the same horrible-sounding words that had lately turned the palace gates of Charn to dust. But nothing happened except that Aunt Letty, thinking that those horrible words were meant to be ordinary English, said, "I thought as much. The young woman is drunk. Drunk! She can't even speak clearly." It must have been a terrible moment for the witch when she suddenly realized that her power of turning people into dust, which had been quite real in her own world, was not going to work in ours. But she did not lose her nerve even for a second. Without wasting a thought on her disappointment, she lunged forward, caught Aunt Letty round the neck and the knees, raised her high above her head as if she had been no heavier than a doll, and threw her across the room, while Aunt Letty was still hurling through the air. The housemaid, who was having a beautifully exciting morning, put her head in the door and said, "If you please, sir, the Ansoms come." "Lead on, slave," said the witch to Uncle Andrew. He began muttering something about regrettable violence, must really protest, but at a single glance from Jadis she became speechless. He drove him out of the room and out of the house, and Diggory came running down the stairs just in time to see the front door close behind them. "Jiminy," he said, "she's loose in London, and with Uncle Andrew. I wonder what on earth is going to happen now." "Oh, Master Diggory," said the housemaid, who was really having a wonderful day, "I think Miss Ketterly's hurt herself somehow." So they both rushed into the drawing room to find out what had happened. If Aunt Letty had fallen on bare boards, or even on the carpet, I suppose all her bones would have been broken. But by great good luck, she had fallen on the mattress. Uncle Letty was a very tough old lady. Aunts often were in those days, and she had some sal volatile, and sat still for a few minutes. She said there was nothing the matter with her except a few bruises. Very soon she was taking charge of the situation. "Sarah," she said to the housemaid, who had never had a day before like this, "go round to the police station at once and tell them there's a dangerous lunatic at large. I will take Mrs. Kirk's lunch up myself." Mrs. Kirk was, of course, Diggory's mother. When Mother's lunch had been seen to, Diggory and Aunt Letty had their own. After that, he did some hard thinking. The problem was how to get the witch back to her own world, or at any rate out of ours, as soon as possible. Whatever happened, she must not be allowed to go rampaging around the house. Mother must not see her, and if possible, She must not be allowed to go rampaging around London either. Diggory had not been in the drawing room when he or she tried to blast Aunt Lady, but he had seen her blast the gates of Charn, so he knew her terrible powers and did not know that she had not lost any of them by coming into our world, and he knew she meant to conquer our world. At the present moment, as far as he could see, she might be blasting Buckingham Palace or the Houses of Parliament, and it was almost certain that quite a number of policemen had by now been reduced to little heaps of dust, and there didn't seem to be anything he could do about it. But the rings seemed to work like magnets, thought Diggory. If I can only touch her and then slip on my yellow, we shall both go into the wood between the worlds. I wonder, will she go all faint again there? Was that something the place does to her? Or was it only the shock of being pulled out of her own world? But I suppose I'll have to risk that. And how am I to find the beast? I don't suppose Aunt Letty would let me go out, not unless I said where I was going, and I haven't got more than twopence. I'd need any amount of money for buses and trams if I went looking all over London. Anyway, I haven't the faintest idea where to look. I wonder if Uncle Andrew is still with her. It seemed in the end that the only thing he could do was to wait and hope that Uncle Andrew and the witch would come back. If they did, he must rush out and get hold of the witch and put on his yellow ring before she had a chance to get into the house. This meant that he must watch the front door like a cat watching a mouse's hole. He dared not leave his post for a moment, so he went into the dining room and glued his face, as they say, to the window. It was a bow window from which you could see the steps up to the front door and see up and down the street, so that no one could reach the front door without your knowing. I wonder what Polly's doing, thought Diggory. He wondered about this a good deal as the first slow half hour ticked on. But you need not wonder, for I'm going to tell you. She had got home late for her dinner with her shoes and stockings very wet, and when they asked her where she had been and what on earth she'd been doing, she said she had gone or been out with Diggory Kirk. Until further questioning, she said he had got her feet wet in a pool of water and that the pool was in a wood. Asked where the wood was, she said she didn't know. Asked if it was one of the parks, she said truthfully enough that she supposed it might be a sort of park. From all of this, Polly's mother got the idea that Polly had gone off without telling anyone to some part of London she didn't know and gone into a strange park and amused herself jumping into puddles. As a result, she was told that she had been very naughty indeed, and that she wouldn't be allowed to play with that Kirk boy any more if anything of the sort ever happened again. Then she was given dinner with all the nice parts left out and sent to bed for solid 2 hours. It was a thing that happened to one quite often in those days. So while Diggory was staring out of the dining room window, Polly was lying in bed, and both were thinking how terribly slowly the time could go. I think myself, I would rather have been in Polly's position. She had only to wait for the end of her 2 hours, but every few minutes Diggory would hear a cab or a baker's van or a butcher's boy coming round the corner and think, here she comes, and then it wasn't. And in between those false alarms, for what seemed hours and hours, the clock ticked on, and one big fly, high up and far out of reach, buzzed against the window. It was one of those houses that get very quiet and dull in the afternoon, and always seemed to smell of mutton. During his long watching and waiting, one small thing happened which I'll have to mention, because something important came of it later. A lady called with some grapes for Diggory's mother. And as the dining room door was open, Diggory couldn't help overhearing Aunt Letty and the lady as they talked in the hall. What lovely drapes, came Aunt Letty's voice. I'm sure if anything could do her good, these would. But poor, dear little Mabel, I'm afraid it would need fruit from the land of youth to help her now. Nothing in this world will do much. Then they both lowered their voices and said a lot more than he could hear. And that ends the part 1 of chapter 7. This is Papa B reading. Goodbye.